there's a little bit of like a romanticization of jiu-jitsu. And of course, I think rightfully so. Like, as we're talking about, when you spend enough time in something, it ends up kind of unfolding in a way that it's more beautiful than what you originally thought, or what it was at the beginning. But for you as a coach, I'm sure you see maybe people coming in with an expectation that, hey, in a month, like, jiu-jitsu is going to be it's going to change my life. I'm going to be a new person. Yeah. Where in reality, as we just spoke about 5 minutes ago, it's like, yeah, that happens after 7 years of putting in every single day. So how do you as a coach kind of address that and then allow people to maybe like those illusions or delusions to fall over time? Because I'm sure, unless I'm off the mark, I'm sure you've seen that as a coach now.
Oh, bro, you hit the nail on the head, because, if you listen to people if you listen to anyone that's basically done anything for 10, 15, 20 years, that's kind of like an art form or some creative thing or some whatever it is, they'll talk about how it's changed their life, right? And it's not just jiu-jitsu, it's all kinds of stuff. But, a lot of really tough individuals, like, they talk about jiu-jitsu changing their life and how it's, just revolutionized the way they see the world and everything else. And so you get people, because they hear that and they come in and they're sold on that idea. And then they come in and they come to the realization that, oh, well, this is a lot of really uncomfortable situations where I've got a sweaty guy's armpit in my face. And this isn't anything like they were talking about, where's the profound openings of my mind and everything else, so, but it's like that with everything, right? Like, when you're trying to sell someone on an idea, like, you don't sell them on like the actual grind of it, which is everything's a grind, right? You say, like, if you're going to say, hey, you're going to run a business, well, you're going to sell someone on, like, hey, you get to kind of have something you have purpose about. You get to make your money. You have the chance of financial sort of security and freedom for you and your family, and you get to decide your own schedule, whatever. But then it's like, now you have to go through this grind. Or, when you would listen to someone talk about being smart with your financial, situation, they talk about being, measured with the way you spend your money, not be reckless or whatever else. But then it comes to the uncomfortable situations of, now you can't buy that a really expensive car that you think you need, or you can't buy the big giant house that you think you have, because you have to be intelligent with the way that you're spending your money. So jiu-jitsu is the same way. It's like, you have a situation where you're making the sale based off of like the end result, which is what everybody's after anyway. But the reality is, just like everything else, it's a friggin' grind. And I think the more once you've been through a good grind as far as skill acquisition goes, you just sort of understand that that's what you're in for, no matter what. Like, my wife and I, we started riding. My wife she's been around horses forever, but we bought a property and we have some land and stuff. And so I wanted to get into horses. So I'm like taking riding lessons, right? And then, one day I got chucked off the horse, because that happens, and, got back up and got on it later on that day. She was asking me if I was going to go back to it. I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to go back to it. She's like, I thought you were going to maybe not want to do it because you got thrown off the horse. I was like, I knew that shit was going to happen. I was like, this is the way that everything works, right? No matter what you do, you're going to get thrown off this stuff. So understanding that, you try to basically just give people little wins along the way as far as a coach, because you understand you got sold by Jocko, you got sold by, Joe Rogan, or maybe even myself on the internet telling you how cool this thing is. Now you're here and you're faced with this tough reality. So structuring training in a way where they get little wins periodically, so that, yeah, you are getting your face smashed and it is very uncomfortable, but like, you did something right today and you got to leave with either a better understanding of the knowledge, or you got to feel like you had a moment where you were kind of doing something correctly, which is addictive. And then that'll get you coming back tomorrow. Opposed to like when I first started, they would just throw us to the wolves. And if you stuck around, if you were tough enough to do it, great. If not, then whatever, and there was no real onboarding process. There was no beginner classes, nothing like that. And so we try to, I think, the coaches nowadays try to be a little bit more intelligent with the way that people brought up, so that they do have a chance to kind of get into this stuff, and they have a better trajectory towards making those long-term profound sort of experiences. But in the beginning, like, everybody comes in with that, but that's the way it is. So.
And was that something like you as a personality, I think you're kind of known for, at least the content I've been exposed to, of kind of being that person to, like, and soft isn't the right word, but have an opening to be like, hey, here's how to get started in maybe a sustainable way, and culturally for you to be the guy that's like, hey, let's not be hard asses. Like, let's get people in the door. Let's expose them to jiu-jitsu in a way that, like, they actually want to come back and they're not just getting their ass kicked. Was that something, is that just your personality that you've always had kind of like that mentality? Or was that something after you spent some time in the sport that you realized there was kind of a need for?
I mean, I don't know, man. You just like you're, I'm a coach, and so I'm working with people, and if your job is to be a coach, then typically, especially with what we do, we're dealing with a lot of, regular people. We're not dealing with just like stud, D1 athletes, right? We're dealing with regular people most of the time, and every now and then we'll sprinkle in some really like some stud athletes that come along. So you're trying to help people, right? And so it just, you look at it from the standpoint of, here's an example. I had a guy he's one of our coaches now at the gym. He's a full-time coach now. He started off at our gym back in 2009, maybe 2010. And he was 290 pounds, super insecure, chunky, fat kid, right? He starts training with us. We have a beginner class, and we're like bringing him up slowly. And then a couple of years later, he fights alongside me on an MMA show, and, TKOs his opponent in the first round, at the 170 pound division. Pretty freaking cool, Geez. So like, you see that where like the reason that guy was able to do that was because we took care of him and brought him up intentionally slowly. Now the dude's tough as nails. And like when we train together, I mean, he freaking comes after me and can give me all I can handle now, but again, had we thrown him in and just threw him in there and said, let's go, man, stop being a bitch, whatever, it's not necessarily going to be helpful for most people. And also too, I don't know, like it's probably just my personality. I'm kind of repulsed by a lot of the like fake alpha shit that's on the internet, like where you get these guys, they're just like yelling and cussing at people. And I guess that's what it means to be really tough and hard. I'm not saying there aren't people that can sort of wield that within a sort of an intelligent way. But there's times where I see it and I'm like, all right, man, chill out. Maybe someone needs that. It's just something that I don't really care for. So it's probably just like, to go back to your question, probably just more my personality. And so I want to help people and, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I think, the thing to pull out of that is just the grind that you talked about. That's what always ultimately makes things worthwhile in the end, right? Like if it was easy, if you could get good at jiu-jitsu in 3 weeks, then it's like, that fulfillment on the back end once you start.
Nobody would care.
Yeah, exactly. Then it it renders no happiness. So it's almost like in life, the worse the grind is, the greater potential happiness on the back side of it, and it's purely because of the grind, right? And
100%.
When guys come into a jiu-jitsu gym, I'm sure there's a little bit of humble pie in the beginning, particularly probably like I would say a good athlete in another sport is probably the most humbling, because you think, all right, like let's take a football guy, right? And he thinks, all right, you're a tough guy. And then he outweighs a guy by 50 pounds and he gets just tied in a fucking knot. You know what I mean? He's like, holy shit, this dude's 170. He just choked me out in, 10 seconds. That's a good dose of humility to take. But it's cool to see, like, I'm sure there's so many guys or girls that have transcended that initial kind of adjustment period and then became stronger individuals on the back end. And particularly, I think for something like jiu-jitsu or anything related to combatives, or I would even say contact sports, I think as a man or even a woman, when you start to possess tools where you can now dominate most other men under normal circumstances, you should by no means become this asshole that flaunts that, but you internalize that, and at least from my perspective, there gives a lot of self-confidence. And again, you shouldn't project it because now you're just an asshole, but there's just something to be said for, all right, I know I can dominate most other men on this planet because of things that I've learned. And if, shit were to hit the fan, I think I'm, comfortable with how that would go. But it's just, it just, well, I guess alters your outlook. And I think, as young football players, like, when you start lifting weights and stuff, you start throwing around, you're some naive high school kid. You start to get a little of that swagger, like, oh, I'm a big tough guy now. But of course, hopefully over time it gets a little bit more nuanced and for the right reasons. And I'm sure, you seem like a pretty humble jiu-jitsu guy. You're able to kind of internalize that, and you clearly don't project that, in any way. And that's cool. I think the baddest dudes in the room is like, that's the quiet guy that doesn't look that bad, but he could fuck everybody up there. You know what I mean? And those are the guys that I look up to,